I didn't have this necessary drive to become an entrepreneur. I was very happy being a doctor, but most of our problem comes from trying to get doctors to download us in the first place and competing with the other 100 recruitment agencies for getting doctors' eyes on their platform on a marketing level, on a founder level, on a business level.
What triggered you then to say, I'm going to turn this into an app and start a business around it?
I spent a lot of money on dev, and nowadays I could probably get the same dev for, $1,000, $2,000. You can't vibe code a product without knowing what's going on.
Welcome to the DevReady podcast.
Joining me on the DevReady podcast today, I have Dr. Anu. Dr. Anu, thanks for taking the time out of your morning to have a chat with me.
Thanks for talking to me too, Anthony.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a pleasure. For those of you that are new to the podcast or don't know how I do this, I've never actually met Dr. Anu before. This is the first time we're meeting, so I don't know anything about it. So I will let you introduce yourself because no way I could do a decent job.
I love it. So my name's Anu. I'm a New Zealand-born medical doctor who came to Australia in 2020. I still work intermittently as a clinical doctor all across Australia, mainly as a locum, which is like a contract worker in regional and remote hospitals. In 2023, I started the idea for a company called StatDoctor. We're a B2B software solution for healthcare facilities, allowing them to find, hire and pay doctors faster than going through recruitment agencies. And then as part of that connection marketplace, we're building software solutions for doctors as well. We allow them to find work, but then also communicate, connect, bring in all of their development and education into one easy-to-use phone app.
So very concise way of explaining it. You've been doing this for a while.
I have been. We're in cap raising mode, so I've been talking to investors quite a lot for the last few months.
Yeah, you got your elevator pitch down, Pat.
I do.
Just touching on something you said that you moved in 2020, something to do with COVID?
No, actually, I came for my partner. I was chasing a girl over to Australia, so I did my med schooling in New Zealand. And then in 2020, I always wanted to come to Australia. My partner did her med schooling at Melbourne Uni. So I always had a plan of moving over here and then made the run right into Victoria in the heart of COVID, most lockdown state. And I was working at the Northern Hospital, which is quite often regarded as the busiest hospital in Australia. So it was a pretty busy time for me.
I didn't realize it's the busiest hospital.
Yeah, the ED often, there's 50 to 70 patients in the waiting room pretty regularly. It's the emergency teams there, nurses, doctors, allied health practitioners do an amazing job. And I definitely did a full year there and was extremely burnt out.
You don't hear a lot of positive news from that hospital, from the people that live around it.
Yeah, look, it's poor. I think it's undersized, understaffed for the difficulty of the work, and the area around it is kind of a little bit more of a lower socioeconomic area of Melbourne, but is also rapidly growing. So there's a lot of reasons to put more time and energy into that part of Melbourne. And plus the Northern Hospital takes all of the ill patients north of the border. So Bendigo, Ballarat, etc., all come through to the Northern. So it's an extremely busy hospital.
Yeah, it's just a bit of poor planning probably from the government. They're having the hospital built 30, 40 years ago.
I agree.
But then another 10, 30, 40, 50,000 people move into the area in the way they've been building. I'm from the north. I used to live in South Morang. I'm in lower area now in Reservoir, but yeah, I'm familiar with the area and the hospital there.
I definitely think a second hospital needs to be built. I know that the private hospital was moved there recently, and that does help with some private hospital inpatient overflow. But the real issue is in the emergency department. It's just not big enough for the size. There's not enough staff. There needs to be a second emergency department up north, in my opinion.
Something I learned today. So did you say 21 or 22 is when you started your entrepreneurial journey?
So 2023, actually, it started. I didn't have this necessary drive to become an entrepreneur. I was very happy being a doctor, but I found a lot of issues working in my own life with the recruitment processes for doctors. And so I fell into the solution that we built today, which is really building a two-sided marketplace that connects doctors directly with healthcare facilities. Back in 2022, the only way to find kind of temporary or contract work was to go through recruitment agencies. They didn't provide much value for me as a doctor because they locked you into these horrible contracts. They didn't really side with you if there was any problems with negotiations with the healthcare facility. And you just got peppered with random shifts all the time. You had no autonomy or control. And then I worked with a hospital in regional Victoria, helping them with recruitment. And I found that they didn't really like their recruitment agencies either. The commissions were 20 to 35%. There was a lot of email back and forth, sometimes fax back and forth. It was just so manual and just demoralizing. And so I said, surely we have technology now. Why are we not implementing it in healthcare? And so, yeah, it kind of fell into the product.
Is it focused more on permanent roles or is it on the locum side?
So at the moment, more on the locum side. Part of our value proposition to healthcare facilities is we have no temp to perm contracts. So we don't charge you. If your locum doctor comes to a rural town, really loves it, we don't charge for them to be converted to a full-time worker. A typical recruitment agency will charge somewhere between $20,000 to $80,000, dependent on the skill set of that doctor. And all that does is continues the cycle of contract workers in these regional towns, which is a kind of mission-driven purpose of ours, which is there's enough ways to try and make money in the recruitment process that we can't be draining good resources from particularly rural towns. If a doctor wants to work there, we should encourage it, not penalize them.
I didn't realize that the conversion fees were so high for the recruitment agencies. So that's why it's a very contested area.
It is, yeah. So there's over 100 recruitment agencies in Australia. All of them provide very similar value. Say they're adding value to doctors. They really just do everything manually and have huge employee bases. The biggest ones have 200, 300 employees. And the job of these employees is to make good relationships with 5 to 10 doctors and then good relationships with all the different healthcare facilities and try and constantly place them. And that's really valuable maybe 20 years ago when technology didn't automate all of these processes.
Yep.
Now, those companies are making 50, 60 million, but spending 20, 30 million on expenses or on salaries. That doesn't need to happen. So we run everything technologically. We do the same value add that a recruitment agency does, but I'm able to, through AI, but also just simple logic, able to streamline that process completely.
We're a bit familiar with the space as well, so you're probably well aware of the product Locum.
I am very aware of the product Locum.
So we've been developing and supporting that solution for over 3 years and bringing that to market as well with Surge. So I know a bit of the problems in the space, but I'll try and keep some of the questions a bit light on that. Are you having trouble in the market with trying to fill the permanent positions because of that probably hesitation and the recruitment agencies trying to hold their moat?
Yeah, I think that the main problem for us is getting doctors on board to use our platform and understand that the traditional processes aren't the only way to go about finding work. There's a lot of fear with change and, having that autonomy on yourself and not having someone handhold you through the recruitment process can make people a little bit scared. But once doctors start locuming through us, they find the autonomy, the power just so much easier. So our churn is zero of any doctor who works through us. They just continue to work through us. Most of our problem comes from trying to get doctors to download us in the first place, and competing with the other 100 recruitment agencies for getting doctors' eyes on their platform on a marketing level, on a founder level, on a business level.
Yeah, because the challenge is, in the current process, it's the recruitment agency probably reach out when there's a position. So it's a bit more passive, where having an app, having to open it is a more of an active activity. The person has to engage with it and decide to open it to check if there's a job. Unless you start getting notifications and you push information to them.
I think our value add really is on the notification side. So you can set when you are free to work, when you want notifications, who you want notification of, what type of shifts you want notification. You have all that functionality, and therefore you just hold the power. So you can say, I'm going on holiday, I don't want to be messaged for 2 weeks, turn all the notifications off. Whereas it's very hard to do that with your recruitment agency when you're on their email list. I was on 5 recruitment agencies' email lists. I was working a night shift in one hospital. One recruitment agency would call me in the morning. I'm asleep, trying to sleep after my night shift, saying, we have this shift available. You'd be perfect for it in Perth. And I'm in Melbourne being like, this is just ridiculous. So it's really about where that power lies and how we can put that power back into hospitals and doctors, which is what we're trying to do.
It is, like you said, it's a technology. The process is for a different time with the technology that we have now. Everything's phone-based. Yeah, like you mentioned faxes. We've been working in the pharmacy space for 13 years now, and faxes are still used in pharmacies, which still blows my mind that it's 2026.
Yeah. It's often one of my favorite pieces to tell people who are outside of healthcare, which is like, when is the last time you used a fax? And my answer is actually yesterday. I used a fax yesterday. And people are like, fax machines don't exist. I'm like, no, they don't exist in normal world. When you come into a hospital, every GP clinic all have fax machines. So it's ridiculous.
I don't understand how that's better or easier. I don't even know where you could even buy one if you were looking for it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
There's some specialized.
I don't know what happens when they break. Like, surely no one
Yeah.
is ready to fix them now, but I don't know.
Well, there's some brand new old stock in a box in some warehouse that someone's just hoarding, probably.
Exactly right.
So, what triggered you then to say, all right, I'm going to turn this into an app and start a business around it? What was that like moment?
So the moment came, essentially what happened was I was doing a lot of locum work through an agency in 2022. I got into a little bit of a contract dispute with my agency where I wanted to sign on directly with the hospital. And the hospital added all of this extra money, travel, etc., saying, if you sign on directly with us, we'll give you all of these perks. And it had been 7 months after this recruitment agency had introduced me to this hospital. And so I signed on, got all these extra perks. I was living the dream. And then 3 weeks later, this recruitment agency said, hang on, you're actually still contracted to us. And I said, how? I organized this myself. I signed everything. I sent over all my documents. And in the fine print of my recruitment agency contract was a buyout clause of 12 months. So I wasn't allowed to sign any contracts directly with the hospital for any 12-month period after they had made an introduction. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I kind of ignored it. And then they threatened the hospital with legal action. And obviously the hospital got concerned and cut all of my perks and said I had to include them in all of my payments and billing so they could get their 20-30% commission. And I thought, this is a rural hospital that is really struggling financially. I was willing to go there for a year. And, the value was going to come 50% to me, 50% they were going to save on where those commissions were going to go. And I said, if this is happening to me, it must be happening to other people. And I surveyed a few locum doctors and I got like 50 people saying, yeah, this has all happened to me. This is ridiculous. And so I said, what I'm going to do in Victoria is phone hospitals directly. This is now 2023, still middle of COVID, and say, hey, I'm a locum doctor. Can I come sign directly with you? And at first they were like, oh, we don't really understand this, but we'll take you on. Then I started working and news got around that I was making these direct contracts with hospitals. And I consider myself quite a good active locum doctor. They then started calling me and offering me higher rates and prioritizing me of anyone coming through an agency. And so then all of these 40, 50 people saw that and said, we want to come join what you're doing instead of coming through an agency. So I kind of fell into this and started basically becoming this kind of manual recruiter through an Excel spreadsheet, and then said, there's really a business here if I can put some tech behind it. I came from a non-technical background. I'm a doctor through and through. And so went through a couple of accelerator incubator programs, brought on, paid an external dev agency to build version 1 of the platform, which we released in January of 2025. And we got some really good traction there. By the middle to end of 2025, I was able to bring on a full-time CTO and bring on a second member of our team. And we're now a 3-person team with good revenue. And then we're capital raising at the moment.
That's a exciting journey. So you actually had product market fit. You had tech, you had the Excel sheet.
Yes, I had some tech, the Excel sheet.
A lot of people are tech companies that have Excel running a majority of things still. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the way you pitch things. And you probably were doing that in those early stages. You weren't telling the hospitals you're running everything off Excel. And we've got a system. That's all they need to know.
Definitely. We've got a system. That's all that you need to know. It reminds me of the company Granola. I don't know if you've ever heard or used that, how the people were...
I've started seeing a lot of their ads recently.
Yeah. So they initially said that they were an AI kind of transcription software, but they were just listening in and writing things by hand and summarizing it in the first part. I think it was 2 guys in their uni dorm room surviving on ramen. And now they've just raised millions of dollars and have a huge valuation, and everyone loves them because, you have to start somewhere when you don't have any money to try and figure out where you're going to build to.
Yeah. So going through that process and those accelerators, what were some of the biggest things you had to learn about trying to create the actual tech? Because as a non-tech, you don't know anything about what it takes to build software.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of learnings. I came with a lot of personal biases for what I thought the solution needed to be like. And this is something that I tell a lot of newer founders, particularly I do a lot of advocacy for the clinician-led founder space, trying to encourage doctors, nurses, allied health practitioners to start their own businesses. And the part that I think I got wrong or didn't do as well as I could have was I didn't identify the problem well enough. I spent too little time on the problem and too much time thinking about the solution. And so version 1 was a very biased solution that valued me, but didn't actually speak to all of my customers.
Okay. Yeah. Solving your problem.
I've solved my problem. And, it's easy to think my problem is the same as every other locum doctor's problem, but that's not the case. And then also we're building a 2-sided marketplace. So one of our other customers is healthcare facilities. And so I was very biased in my thinking healthcare facilities want just the cheapest option possible. But in reality, they don't want the cheapest doctor. They want the most secure doctor first. They want to not be in the news for some person who fakes being a doctor. So I didn't think about all of that. I was just so thinking, how do I get the cost as low as possible?
Yep.
But it took a little bit of fine tuning after kind of designing the first product to realize, hang on, this is not exactly what we wanted. And so the first 2 incubator programs kind of took me through that. I went through one called Hyper Apps, which was a paid incubator. I paid. Part of that incubator was really about business development and personal development, understanding the founder mindset. And the thing I liked about that incubator program is it was done on your own time. So I was still working full-time as a doctor. I had 0 hours during the day, and I was an ED doctor. So I was working days, mornings, afternoons, nights. My schedule was everywhere. So they provide you like this back-end Notion education platform that you work through at your own pace. And by the end of that program, they provided me some simple wireframes, a little bit of logo, how to kind of structure a business, how to build out like simple sales pipelines, operational pipelines, etc. I found that really useful. And then they introduced me to the first development agency who built version 1 of our platform. I think the thing I always think now is I probably should have built something using a simple AI dev wireframe tool or something just to think about it, but they weren't available.
They weren't around. Yeah, they weren't around back then.
Exactly. They weren't around back there. So it's easy to think, I spent, a lot of money on dev. And nowadays I could probably get the same dev for, $1,000, $2,000. But the thing is, back then it wasn't available. And 2, particularly in healthcare, health tech, you can't vibe code a product without knowing what's going on, because as soon as some document goes somewhere you don't know, we handle a lot of sensitive doctor documents. We need to know where they are. They're double encrypted. They're, SOC 2 compliant, all of that stuff. And so it's easy to think, it could be done easier, but we've had no fallout from our tech. Our tech's never gone down. We've not lost any documents. We're not in the news for, providing a bad doctor. So version 2 of our platform.
And that's what you need.
Exactly. You only get one chance in health tech. That's all.
You have to provide a quality service to anyone you're doing, and you're in a bit more scrutiny because you're in the health space.
Exactly. So, the dev agency did their job. And then by July of last year, it was really nice to bring on a technical person into our team who has just taken our product leaps and bounds. And it's amazing what one dev can do with a Claude code, vibe coding, build on top of a founder base. And he basically codes for what I think would have taken me 5 or 6 devs about 2 years ago. And he's just a machine. That's great.
It does definitely accelerate the development. As long as you've got, from a technical perspective, so I'm a developer by trade, is as long as you understand what the code is actually doing, you're structuring it and you're telling it how you want it to work, not just build a marketplace. Okay, I need hospitals to sign up. Okay, I need to capture PO documents to prove they're a doctor. If you prompt it that way, you're going to get garbage. If you tell it this is the structure, this is the flow, these are the data, the objects that I want, or whatever it may be, you'll get a much better idea. But I find it's difficult for non-technical people to think in that way.
Yeah, no.
Because we went to uni, we got taught to think that way. So it's very structured, logical, and it's just my brain. Whenever someone's talking to me about a product, I'm thinking about database first. How am I going to arrange the data? How would I query it? And then I start planning around it. But you don't normally think that way.
No, I definitely would say having a technical person has saved me a lot of heartache, and I'm glad I paid the dev agency up front, even though looking back on it looks like a heavy cost, because it's allowed us to continue to grow and scale. And you're right, the infrastructure that my CTO has built and is able to just I can text him being like, this is a problem. And within an hour, he knows where in the code to look, what to fix, how to do it, upgrade, boom, it's second to none. So I talked to a lot of clinicians, non-technical founders about, you really want someone who understands the code by your side. If you're going to pay a dev agency and bring on a CTO afterwards, you're going to have to, at some point, rearrange your code so your CTO is comfortable with it. And that process is annoying no matter how you manufacture it. So if you can bring in a CTO earlier, that sounds good, but then you have to get someone to buy into your idea with no proven traction, and no CTO is going to work for just random equity of a established product in a market they don't know about. So you have to pay them. So it's a really hard balance to me, and everyone runs it differently. I know one of my friends built a tech product quite early and brought on a technical co-founder quite early, and they had a falling out within like 3 months, and the code is just left there and his business is in shatters. So you want to bring on someone that you trust and know. So there's a tough balance.
Well, you have to be able to work with the person you trust and know that they've got your back and you've got theirs. In that situation, from having done this almost 300 times and run this podcast now, I can pretty sure say that the CTO had an idea of how the software should work and what he thought the business would need. The founder had a different idea of what it should go. They couldn't communicate. And then as the technical person, I'm sure he thought he knew better on the software. And that's probably where it went, because that's generally how it goes.
100%. You're right on the ball there.
Yeah, and then saying like bringing on a CTO, you probably have to be careful with saying that term to a lot of founders as well, because if you're looking for a CTO, you've got the CTO of large companies who may never have been developers or have been so far removed from the tech that they don't know what it is anymore. We just need AI is all this spouting. Or you've got probably what you want to act as a CTO, which is a lead technical person or a senior developer or someone that can actually run it, have conversations with people, which is a rare skill to find in certain developers as well. And then, can help you and support you and understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to explain.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And definitely going out and trying to find that person is really difficult for startups. And I think quite difficult in Australia. I went looking in about June of last year and I got about 15 applicants, mainly because I'd become quite prominent on LinkedIn. A lot of people had known and heard about me. And I ended up going for a technical person who was overseas. So my CTO lives in Tunisia. And he what I found really valuable about him is his understanding of the product and the niche technicality of it, even though he wasn't Australian, and his ability to say, he had the founder mindset. You kind of want a co-founder technical person because, we weren't making much revenue. I couldn't pay him a seat. He could easily go and make 200, 300K at some tech company. I can't pay him that. So the question becomes, how do we balance equity? How does he understand the value of what we're building? What can he do over there? Could he understand the Australian privacy laws, et cetera, and be able to implement them? And I've got no regrets. He's been fantastic.
That's a great outcome. You definitely need someone that can work with you. It's a partnership. Has to work both ways. The only red flag in that situation I can see is you probably need someone onshore as well that can look at the data that's coming out of Australia, which might be yourself or you've got someone else, just because of our data sovereignty laws, especially production.
Yes, I do have someone I have someone in Australia who I do some medical advisory work for their startup, and he does some CTO help for our startup. So we kind of balance each other out nicely.
That's something I think a lot of people don't know about either. Like if you're using an overseas company, if you're running an Australian clients, they can't access the production data. They can't see the data that we store here. Data can leave offshore for processing and come back, but it can't be stored overseas either.
It can't be stored. Exactly. Yeah.
And then you've got all the other requirements for the medical space, which we won't even touch.
No, it's not worth it.
Yeah. So going on that journey, what are some of the big learnings that you've had then? So early on, you mentioned that you built it for what you thought and not what the hospitals actually wanted. Did you not speak to the clinics initially? Or did you think you did?
I think the second one. So I went into the clinics with preconceived ideas and I told them this is what I'm building. But what I really should have done is say, hey, what is your problem? Do you have the same problem? How would you like the solution to look? And it's something that we talk a lot about in a few of the advisory work I do called the mum test, where you go and if you ask your mum, no matter what you tell your mum, she will always agree with you. And in the same way, if I come to you, Anthony, and say, I've got this great startup idea, I come with enthusiasm, I say, this is what I want to build, you're not going to shut me down. You're going to say, oh, sounds great. But, that's not necessarily the best idea. And so you need to have a bit more open questioning, not go in with any preconceived ideas and see if you can get the client to come to the same offer or value or product that you're building as you are. And so what happened was the difference between version 1 and version 2 was me being a first-time founder versus a second-time founder. So version 2 of our platform, which was released in January of this year, we built it for 3 months with 5 of our leading hospitals. And so we had them on monthly, weekly calls saying, this is what we're building. Do you agree? what do you want different? How do you want this flow to work? Where do you even want like a button to sit for your mouse to click it? Like a lot of our users from a hospital side are 50, 60-year-old, not that technical people who run all the admin of the hospital. So they basically said to us, we want it to run exactly like Google Sheets, Google Word, Google Docs works, because that's where all of us is done. And a lot of the hospitals run through SharePoint. So that whole Microsoft idea works really well for them as well. So we had to say, we couldn't have flashy screens, flashy buttons, as though even though we wanted to build that, we couldn't do that. We have to, it's so minimalist, and that's what they love about it. And so that's very much what I learned a lot of. And they say if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're probably going to be one more than once. I'm definitely going to start some other company at some point in my life. I will build wait lists earlier. I will not hide talking about my product because someone may steal it. I think that's the dumbest thing in the world. And I'll build with my customers and ideally get 2 or 3 customers to be part of the build and even part of the company. I'd love to give some equity to the next customers I build, the early users, because if you can get them on board and be spokespeople for you, it's so easy. And I think this is something that Heidi have done really well here in Australia, the big AI scribe company that's now, they're multi-millions. They basically got like the heads or the highest people in any medical clinic and said, we will bring you on as a enterprise partner. You get free access to Heidi for 1, 2, 3 years. And all you have to do is say, I'm a Heidi partner. That's it. And as a doctor, you think, oh, that's great. I get an AI scribe that would cost me $1,000 a year for free. But as soon as I say, and let's say I'm the head of plastics at Alfred Hospital, I say I'm using Heidi, every single junior below me goes, okay, I'm going to use Heidi. And so they did so well to get people on that enterprise level.
Yeah, they got the advocates, the champions there pushing it. It's almost like building like a referral partner network up front as you go.
It's really hard for people like myself because I'm a doctor. I have no business experience, no business networks, no enterprise networks, no mentors or anything. I found that really hard to build initially. But now, like I'm 31, I've got a big kind of building a bit of a personal brand and following. You can just see how much easier it is when people are already looking at you.
And definitely does make it easier because you've got the network. It's easier to get the voice out. You've done this before as well now compared to where you were. So you've done V2 in that time you did V1 to V2. There's a lot of learnings. And then a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that you can move from and know how to move forward with. But yeah, having that feedback and getting people to tell you what they want is crucial. It's getting the stakeholders involved because every idea is something you think is going to be amazing. And then sometimes you need the feedback to say, yeah, that flow doesn't actually work. That's not what we want. Like you mentioned earlier, where you thought the cheapest rate is what they want, where what they want is the best quality.
Exactly.
They want the best outcomes for their patients, which means they need the best quality people in there. And if they have to pay more for it, they're probably better off because that's almost like an insurance payment to pay more for a better quality person.
Yes, exactly. And like part of what we're building in version 2 is like an Uber style model. So doctors and hospitals can rate one another, write testimonials about one another and build a social proof, because the only way doctors can be verified for their skill level is through references. But I go to my 2 best friends and say, hey, can you be my reference? They're never going to say anything bad about me.
Of course not.
So exactly. So the bad doctors always keep getting kicked down the road and keep working. So how do we provide that social proof? And it really is about healthcare facilities having accountability and saying, this doctor did this or didn't do this and this was bad. And then doctors also having accountability and saying, this hospital didn't provide me good onboarding, the accommodation had rats, whatever. And then, if that becomes socialized, they then have to up their game from both ends.
Yeah, they'll both be accountable, and then that will affect them negatively if they're not, and then they'll learn to improve. So it is important to have that visibility there. Just something else you touched on there, which was the sharing your idea earlier or talking about it earlier. That's another thing we've seen through the podcast and all the other startup founders we talk to. And then because we talk to a lot of startup founders as part of our work where we try and get projects and consulting with clients, a lot of people want us to sign an NDA and then want to protect their idea. And what I end up telling everyone is like, so a lot of people say that they're actually scared that someone's going to steal their idea. I'm like, I have a hard enough time running my own business, let alone trying to build yours.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to go and take someone else's idea. There's a lot of learnings that you've got to get to that point to get the idea. And you've probably been thinking about it for months and weeks or years before you even get to that point. So you know where it's meant to go. Just the one statement doesn't give you the business and give it away.
That's so true. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves. And I fell for the trap when I was working. I was like, I'm going to hide this idea. But do you know, 7 different people tried to build medical marketplaces before me. And since we've launched StatDoctor, another 5 have tried to come out. It's not a new idea. Whatever you're building is not new. Like everyone has ideas. Everyone knows the problems that you're facing. And it's all about execution. And the more people you tell, the more eyes you get on you is actually better. And so even if as soon as you have the idea, you should start talking to people and trying to validate it. And if people push back at you, learn from it and try and mold the solution into the correct one.
If you're everyone saying it's a great idea, you're either talking to the wrong people. Very, 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 very unlikely you've actually got something that's an absolute unicorn. Like you need to get feedback. You need people to push back against it and tell you it's wrong. That's how you improve it and make it better. And then if you can get those people on board, then you know you're moving in the right direction.
Definitely agree. And certainly, I basically share my ideas every day on LinkedIn. So I no longer keep anything. And if people can execute and build stuff better than we're building at StatDoctor, power to them. But I tell them where our roadmap is, what we're building, what we're trying to build. And if someone wants to try and outcompete us, they're welcome to.
And then they're playing a catch-up game at the moment. So it's always going to be harder. Yeah. And then when you're established, sort of in your space as well, once you're established, then those recruitment agencies have been there probably for 50, 60 years. Like it's a slow moving industry. And once there's a reputation and relationship there, it's hard to shift.
It is. It is. It's a really tough one. And innovating in health tech, I think, is much different than a lot of other industries. The sales cycles are 12 to 18 months. It's a slow burn. And I think that's why a lot of the other medical marketplaces failed because, revenue up front looks a lot more shiny when you just become a recruitment agency. But you need to think, where am I going to be in 7 to 10 years as opposed to where am I going to be next year? So if you have enough cash to be able to fund 5, 6 years of negative growth, the end result is huge. And if you look at companies that have done that well in the other sectors, they really do have a bit of a slow burn, need some capital up front, but then build big marketplaces with huge control. And once you get market share, then it's really difficult for people to knock you off.
Yeah, and that's the goal for everyone. That's in the game, yes. Really. So how has your capital raising journey gone over the last few months? You mentioned you've been practicing your pitch a bit.
Capital raising is, again, a hugely new thing for me. I come from a medical background. I then upgraded so much in running a business, operations, sales, marketing. And then, as much as you can learn and study about capital raising, nothing prepares you for the actual thing. And it's been a really tough situation. I think a lot of people only share their wins, and when it comes to capital raising, and they'll raise in stealth for 12 months and then say we've opened our round and closed in 10 days, $10 million. And I literally started 3 months ago with no chats to investors, and then I've started talking to smaller VCs, angels, trying to understand how to best structure a deal. And I've really enjoyed pitching. I like talking, as you can probably understand from this podcast. But the part I've really become skilled at is expressing what we're trying to build in a succinct way, trying to show our value in a succinct way, and trying to build a picture of what our company's going to be in 3 to 5 years, which is when investors will be able to realize their gains. And then trying to understand how to structure deals, what VC funding looks like versus angel funding looks like versus, taking bank loans, et cetera, looks like. So we're doing an angel round. We're raising through a safe note, which is kind of a little bit unheard of for some Australian businesses and non-people who are in the startup space. But, if you're a YC Combinator or in any of those accelerator programs, the safe note is pretty typical. And we're trying to raise $1 million. We're probably just about halfway subscribed to that raise. And we're being very strategic with our investors. We want people who add value, as many doctors on the cap table as possible, healthcare executives, business people. And we're asking for capital plus, so money plus advice, networks, etc.
I think that's probably really touching point there is you need people that can add value. If you're looking for investment, you just want people that can throw money at the idea, because that can be anyone. And then they could also put that into any other company. You're not going to get any benefit from it. So it's the extra knowledge, the extra experience of someone that's either gone through it before or has more connections or some network that you can move into that would accelerate you just as fast as what that money would as well.
Yeah. And being aware that, VCs and people who put in money from large institutions put their own terms on the capital raise in your company, and you have to build it in a way that fits their mentality, which is really revenue first, outcomes, mission, patients, whatever you want second. And that's not really where we are at the moment. We want to try and be still there, providing as much value as possible and sticking to our business model, which is trying to reduce hospital expenditure and bring in money to continue our revenue streams through private sources. So we really want to build a community of heaps of doctors and then charge through advertising and affiliates, similar to like a LinkedIn for doctors, if you will, and then reduce the burden on healthcare facilities for recruitment.
So offset the cost of the platform for the healthcare facilities through sort of like ad-based support.
That's really our aim. Like public hospitals are really struggling, and we see that day to day. And some, you will be surprised how much these hospitals are spending on recruitment agencies. Some of the regional towns in Victoria spend $1 million a year on recruitment agencies. That's not on doctors. That's not on infrastructure. That's not on even patient care. That's on recruitment agencies. And these recruitment agencies are making they're making 50 to 100 million rev a year. And I'm not here to bash recruitment agencies. I just think that they take about 10% of doctors, like 10% of the healthcare expenditure is in that recruitment agency space. Can we reduce that to 1% and put the extra $1 billion back into patient care, drug delivery, infrastructure, etc.? And technology is there to do that. And we want to be the ones that are providing it.
And that'll have more benefit for the industry and for the end patient, really.
Exactly. That's definitely where we come from. And I like the idea of I still work clinically and I'm helping patients one-on-one, but I feel like when doctors get placed through our platform, I'm helping them at scale. And then if we can change the industry, again, that's even larger scale.
Yeah. And you've got the scale and the market opportunities there. So hopefully some of your investors that are going through the process can see that and understand that from your pitch.
Yeah, hopefully. And, if anyone's listening to a podcast who wants to invest, I'd love to have a chat as well.
We'll probably wrap it there. Just it seems like a nice punch note there. If anyone else wants to reach out and find out more about you or get involved, wanting to get involved in the cap raise or pitch, hear your pitch, how can they do that?
LinkedIn's probably best. That's where I'm most active. I'm Dr. Anu G. I'll send you a link and you can put it in the case notes of the to the show notes. That's right. Otherwise, I love chatting about anything health tech and innovation. That's really where my passion lies.
Well, Dr. Anu, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and it's been amazing to hear your journey and where you're going to. And I wish you all the best of luck in the closing at the round.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.